we continue our look at 3D comics with The Simpsons 1992 Annual and mind-bending, knee-slapping, eye-popping 3D, except for the cover. But it's reprinted inside the issue in 3D, so don't worry, we will get there. This was back in the day when DC packaged this up. They'd publish magazines for the newsstands. You might find these on the checkout counters. You might find them next to the newspapers or the comic spinner rack at your local stationery store, or whoever was selling comic books back then. And for $2.95, you got this nice, very, thin, glossy paper, a 32-page, oversized comic book, basically, that would have lots of comics in there and articles and all the rest. Now, this is all in 3D. Once you get to the insides, the entire thing, trust me, is in 3D. And it works rather well. No surprise, Ray Zone did the 3D separation. So once you see his name in there, you know you're in for something good. It reminds me a little bit of the Disney Adventures magazine, which was in 3D that I did a previous review on. There'll be a card at the top of the screen over here for you to click on if you're watching this on your computer. They did the 3D effects on all the ads as well as all the content. So yes, Bart's Butterfinger ad there is in 3D, and it works rather well. That snowball really comes at you pretty good. Homer Simpson going bowling, which I appreciate a good bowling gag. Not that it's really a gag, but these pins are really popping out. The funny thing is the ball being called Thunderball. There is famous Thunderball lanes outside of Detroit, I think it is, where the PBA visits every year. But this is the table of contents as you go. It works well. Yes, we have a 3D ad for basketball cards. That sort of doesn't work all that much. It's very little 3D, I think, just in the cards there themselves. But it's okay. What I want to point out here is this opening editorial from Bart Simpson, which is super well written. It's funny if you read this whole thing. Once the specially treated bioptic glasses are in place, the cartoonographic image can then be viewed by the eyeballoroids. The image is then transmutated to the brain's foyer. From there, the bioptic lenses cause the image from the left eye to be beamed to the inner cranium, and the image from the right eye to be beamed to the outer geranium. The brain, being the fool organ that it is, thinks it's seeing everything twice. The medical term for this phenomenon is blinkus of the thinkus, but we know it more commonly as 3D. Yes, so a funny way to explain 3D. However, what's even better is this little tiny one-sentence line here. View straight on in bright light. The longer you look, the stronger the 3D effect will be. That is so true, and every 3D comic should point that out. You have to be in a well-lit room because just putting the glasses on will dim the image that you're looking at. It's the same as with the 3D movies from a few years back, where you'd have to, wear those glasses, and as we all know, movie theaters don't like projecting movies at full brightness, which is a whole nother story, but with 3D comics, the brighter the room you're in, the more straight on you're viewing the page, the more you look at it, the longer you let your eyes sort of sink into the page, you'll see even more 3D the longer you look at each individual panel or page, and it works better. Now, that all being said, I'll warn you ahead of time as we flip through this, the Simpsons are not the most 3D people in the world. Yes, they have the round eyes and the sort of the round-shaped heads, but this isn't exactly, Jack Kirby comics. So don't expect spectacular 3D like when Ray Zone is doing 3D work on top of an Art Adams or a J. Scott Campbell or something like that. And just to point that out right at the beginning, here is fan mail. We have fan art on here. No one whose name you'd know who later ended up in comics. It is funny there is an O.J. Simpson, Bart Simpson there. And I'm trying to get my head wrapped around the dates. Yeah, 1992, that would be before everything that went down in Brentwood that time. So you have all the fan art. There's one Etienne Bourquevien. So we have a good French person here doing a lot of work, doing a comic strip version of the opening credits to The Simpsons. You have, is this supposed to be Ghostbuster Bart? Bart Murray, yeah, I guess, there you go, with Bartley instead of Slimer, I guess. These little Twizzler drawings, if you cover up the blue lens of your glasses, it'll clear up the clear up the red lines, and you can read a little one-liner that's in there. Nothing too fancy, but more fan art here from people. Then you get into, yes, this was a magazine that was sold regularly, so you could subscribe. Was it quarterly? Does it say on here? 1 year subscription for 5 issues, so just more than quarterly. So this is the cover in 3D, and it works in that each individual character is on a separate plane. I think Marge and Homer are kind of on their own plane in the back together, but, you know, Bart's hands stick up here, and Maggie's just behind him, Lisa's just behind him. The problem is, as always with 3D comics, is when you have blue and red on the screen, they give you that little bit of a glowing effect because of the lenses being blue and red, so the eyes of the characters are very distracting. Marge's hair actually works okay. That doesn't bother me too much, but the red lenses on their glasses, the blue lenses look purple. It's just a little bit off. Sorry, that's the red lenses that look purple. The blue just looks a little shimmery. They do the best they can. The Simpsons lettering stands up a little bit high enough to make Bart push back more, so that works well. And then you have the behind the scenes. So here we are, the beginning of the 3rd season of The Simpsons. This was sort of the party they had for the debut. And honestly, this may be some of the best 3D work of the issue, just because it's a little more, I'm not sure it's necessarily in-depth, but a lot of these pictures have deep backgrounds so they can pop the characters off. There's, Yardley Smith, not Nancy Cartwright. Yardley Smith over there, the voice of Lisa, with her hat that's popping out of the page, but the other people behind her are back there. There's Nancy Cartwright, who is pregnant in that picture, so this was 92, so that child is now in their 30s. And Nancy Cartwright does have a YouTube page or a TikTok page or something. I saw a video from her recently showing a sort of behind the scenes of her vocal booth I think she has in her house, which is pretty cool to this day. Steve Allen, my God, Steve Murray. Steve Allen doing the full 3D, hands coming out of the picture for you. He knows who to play to. He knows what's going on. There's George Takei playing a little bit of pool there. But yeah, this is some cool stuff. They have a lot of the animators, directors on here. That image works really well. He sits behind them, but he's leaning forward, so he pops out a little bit over top the other animator. It's just also great to see that, yes, they do have the Hollywood stars on that first page, but they do include a lot of the people from, at the time, Klasky Kasupo, who were doing the animation for The Simpsons at that point. Very 90s fashion, of course. That light pops out nicely. This is some of the best 3D of the issue for sure. Here is the centerfold. I can't turn it the other way because my screen is widescreen here. It's fine. It's a bit much, to be honest. I mean, the fact is there's not much 3D to be had here. The skateboard pops out. The rips of the pages, if you look long enough, a couple of them, yeah, you can start to see the edges of them popping out more than the edge that is near the rip. So that's a pretty neat effect. But when you have all these characters behind him, it works as a great 2D image, but in 3D, there's not much chance for them to pop out or sink back too much. And for sure, these characters back there start to sink in more, but it's a little flatter than you'd expect it to be. And I don't blame Ray Zone for that. It's just the way the image is. There's a cute little short, humorous comic strip here. Ray Zone puts all the lettering on the same plane as the panel borders, so you're kind of doing the old shoebox look into things. The story takes place inside, except for the blatant 3D-isms of this kebab sticking out and this piece of charcoal jumping off the page. Homer's head itself. This is a weird effect because his head pops out of the panel, but then this line behind his ear there lines up with the panel. So it's like his head sticks out in a way that doesn't necessarily make sense. Maybe if you drew the rest of the jawline in here, it would make more sense that his head popped off his neck, more like that. But these are very minor nitpicks. Ray Zone did great work on here. Homer Simpson blows the whole thing up, of course. They live happily ever after. Itchy and Scratchy have a little tiff, a little fight back and forth. Nothing too spectacular on these 2 pages, to be honest. Here is the Maggie Mini-Mistery. Now, this is one of those, I better take my glasses off for a second. Yeah, this is one of those where they tell you if you cover up one eye and then the other, you can see both images in the same panel. Again, something that Disney Adventures did, which I've since confirmed since I did that video. Ray Zone did do the 3D effects on that, so he worked it in here. I get bored with that pretty quickly, to tell you the truth. I just want the 3D effect. Homer slipping on Maggie's rattle there works rather well. I love this one, because who doesn't love a good cutaway of the hidden secret lair? A classic comic book trope and tradition. In this case, it's Bart's dream house. And also in this case, a great argument for being in a brightly lit room, looking at it straight on and staring at it for a long time. You'll see more and more of the stuff sink in as you go. The lettering kind of floats on top of the screen, but then everything else sinks into the back. It works really well, especially in the cave down here with the mermaid. Lots of good stuff. If you're a Simpsons fan, this magazine is a lot of fun. Then there's an Arnold comic strip. Okay, fine. The Simpsons book ad, which uses 3D pretty well. These bursts are bursting off the page. The family is just behind the book here. Only $10 for the paperback. Nowadays, I'm guessing that'd be about 15 or so. Parker Lewis can't lose. Yes, he gets a 3D ad too. Every time I see an ad like this, it just reminds me more and more of Disney Adventures. But the pages are bigger, so you can actually see the 3D better. Again, Disney Adventures' biggest problem might have just been its size. It's so small, it's tough to get the fine line work to work perfectly for a 3D effect. Here's a series of mainstream cartoons that had Simpsons references in them that they then brought into Simpsons Magazine. They got the rights. That was nice. I haven't seen a Marvin strip in decades at this point. I assume that's not still a comic strip, but I don't know. They added a little bit of 3D effects. I think the best 3D effect is on Family Circus up there. Maybe bringing up Father down there. That works well. And then finally, Itchy and Scratchy's Top 40. Some minor effects there. Bart Mania for your NES and Game Boy. For those of you who are video game fans, that's pretty cool. And then Disney Adventures like add in 3D. And these popcorn kernels do pop off the page nicely. Good job, Ray Zone, there. So that is the Simpsons 1992 annual in mind-bending, knee-slapping, eye-popping 3D. I'm glad I spent $2.95 on this 33 years ago because it gave me something to talk about today.